Welcome to Speaking Candidly with Candace, where we talk in depth with everyday people about their fears, their challenges, and their triumphs. I'm your host, Candace Schoner, and I hope over the next half hour you'll be engaged, enlightened, and inspired to live your best life. My guest today is Renee Blue O'Connell, who was raised in Chicago and now lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. She is employed at the University of Virginia Medical Center as a certified music practitioner. Renee has overcome a severe hearing loss as a result of a series of early childhood viruses. She began playing percussion in her high school band and took up classical guitar. In 2009, after her 50th birthday, Renee received a cochlear implant. This June, she will be presenting at the Hearing Loss Association of America conference in New Orleans. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the show, Renee.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm delighted that you could come. I guess the first question is, when did you first discover your severe hearing loss?
Well, it was when I was 25 years old, and what happened was my friend was a music student, and he lived across the street from me. And he wanted to invite me over to listen to his new piece of music that he wrote on the piano. It was an electronic piano. So I went over there to hear the music. And I was waiting and waiting for him to play. And I finally said, when are you going to play me your new music? I want to hear this. And he said, I just did. Didn't you hear it? And I said, no, I didn't hear anything. And he was like, whoa. So he started playing the piano. Can you hear this? Can you hear this? I said, I hear your finger touching something, but I don't hear the music because it was too high. So that was when I was 25, and that was when I found out that it was bad enough. I never had a hearing aid before then, but after that, that's when I got my hearing aid.
I guess I'd want to know, what was that feeling like to realize that you couldn't hear? How did that impact you? What was your greatest fear and all that?
You know, it's interesting because I thought about that. I remember that moment pretty well still. And he was more upset than I was. And part of the reason is that, to me, it never occurred to me to worry that it was going to obstruct anything I wanted to do. To me, it was kind of like the same as maybe getting glasses or something. A lot of it could have probably been denial, too. But and then in that moment when I found out, it didn't impact me that much. It was later in my life when it kept getting worse and I had to get an implant. That was when I started to feel bad about it. But when I was younger, I just got the hearing aid, and I remember the day I got it. And it was a spring day, and I heard the birds in the trees and the wind blowing and the high heels on the floor and the typing and all these things I didn't hear before.
Now, you got the cochlear implant only in one ear, is that correct?
Yes, and I have a hearing aid in the other ear, so that's called bimodal. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. But the first thing you got was the hearing aid and only in one ear. Is that because one ear had more of a hearing loss?
Yes, and over time, the other ear got to be almost as bad. Yeah.
Now, I mentioned at the top of the show that you're going to be presenting a paper or a lecture at the HLAA conference. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're going to talk about?
Oh, yes. So a lot of people, when they see people being what they call activated for a cochlear implant, they think that that means that suddenly they can hear perfectly and that it cured their hearing. But really what happens is you have to do months of auditory rehabilitation. So there's a series of exercises that you could do. Some are like you could listen to books on tape, or you could listen to radio programs, or you have to do a lot of listening practice, because you have to imagine if you've ever seen an audiogram and you see where the line drops off where you don't hear, and then suddenly technology makes it so those frequencies are available to you, your brain doesn't know what that is. All of a sudden it's just a bunch of noise. That's how I experienced it. So it takes a while for you to be able to have the clarity of being able to recognize speech better. It's not like you don't hear people talking, but you don't hear it clearly. And so I had to do 2 hours a day of rehab. So what I wanted to do, I had a breakthrough in my experience in my rehab. What happened was I was listening to StoryCorps, which is a good show to use because they have people from all different ages, all different places, so you can hear different foreign accents and things. And at one point I realized that the man was from Louisiana. And I thought, that's a Louisiana accent. And I realized that that was a breakthrough because I went from hearing a robotic sound of a man's voice to being able to distinguish a regional accent. So what I'm going to present is ways that people can recreate the environment that they had before they lost their hearing. So let's say they grew up in Chicago. Well, how can you hear voices from Chicago? Maybe you could look up some of the radio shows where they had people from the Midwest. Or, so that's one of the things I want to do is talk about how to use the rehab to design their own program.
Before we got on the air, we were talking about how some of us take our hearing for granted, and we think, okay, once you get an implant or a hearing aid, immediately it's like turning on a light switch and turning it off. That's not correct, right?
No, it's not at all, not at all. And I thought it was going to be. I was so excited when they took me to be activated, is what they call it. And when they turned on the switch, I was shocked because we were in a room, a quiet room like this, but you could hear the fan above, which normally a hearing person would have just heard, but for me, it sounded like a helicopter.
Oh gosh.
I said, what is that? I thought it was a joke, and I thought, this can't be right. But everything became like so loud, it was horrible.
You were playing music before the implant. How did the implant affect your music?
In the beginning, it was really hard because when you think about just that one guitar string, and when you pluck the string and you hear boom, one sound, what you're really hearing is a bunch of frequencies like to come together in time to make one pitch. But I didn't hear one pitch when I got the cochlear implant because my hearing didn't allow me to hear certain frequencies until that moment. So then what happened was they were all disjointed sounds. Like it was like boing, 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 boing. There were lots of sounds, even just with one string. So imagine playing 6 strings all at the same time. So it was really noisy and dissonant. It wasn't a pleasing sound for a long time.
And you also write your own music, don't you?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Who were some of your early musical influences?
Well, I really liked Farron. Farron was someone I really enjoyed because she had an unusual voice, and this was during a time when I got into folk music, like Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez and Judy Collins. They had these really pretty soprano voices that were, perfect. But then people came along like Chrissie Hynde and Tracy Chapman and Farron, who had more lower voices, and they didn't sound, it wasn't pretty. It was more of a husky, more of an earthy kind of beauty that I liked and that I thought was more of what I do.
I would say, and I enjoy your music. I've listened to it many times before. I also, as we discussed again prior to our interview, had taken a sign language course from you. When did you learn sign language? And I know you don't currently use it.
Yeah, I learned sign language when I first came to Charlotte, so in 1989, because I accidentally ended up on the downtown mall and I saw a sign saying, learn sign language. And I thought I probably could do that because of my hearing loss. And so then it was the Independence Resource Center, which was right across the street. And I started as a volunteer to pay for the classes, and I ended up getting a job there for about 7 years. And my boss was deaf, and we signed to him. And I eventually worked as a peer counselor with other people who were deaf, and I learned to speak. And I still can use it, but I'm not very good at it now. And but I enjoy being able to use it. But David was one of the people, my boss, who got a cochlear implant later in life. And when I went to visit him, because he moved away, I had practiced my sign language. But after I got the cochlear implant, he wasn't signing anymore. And I asked, why is nobody signing? And they said, because David can hear.
Oh, wow.
And that was also what influenced me to get the implant, because I thought, if he could hear better than me at that point.
What do you think is the biggest misconception of people who are deaf or who have a severe hearing loss?
I think that people think that we're stupid. I know that some people I know, the way they behave towards me, I could see that they think that I don't comprehend certain things, or they say, oh, don't you have a parking pass that you could use, like a handicap parker? So I could drive, and just things like that. Or some people ask, oh, how do you take a shower, or do you sleep with your
Oh my God.
implant on? I said, no, I walk around with it off all the time.
It's unbelievable how, I guess everybody has to be educated, and part of the show here is to help people get educated and to realize that those are myths, that it's just another challenge that one faces. And I'm impressed that you're able to play music and you continue to play music. What are some of your genres? I think you started playing a little more rock and then went to folk, is that right?
Yeah, originally when I started playing the drums, I had a drum set and I played high school band. And I wanted to be, into rock and roll music. I listened to Jimi Hendrix and Jethro Tull and Yes and Pink Floyd, all that stuff. But then my family moved to a new neighborhood. And there was a girl my age who played folk music, and she had a beautiful voice. Her voice was like Linda Ronstadt or something. And she played guitar. And my mom played the guitar in the 60s, but she didn't stay with it. And we had the guitar in the house. I thought, I think I want to learn to play after hearing her. So then she used to play gigs down in Old Town in Chicago in some of these folk clubs. I started going to the folk clubs with her. I really liked that the music was more about peace and love. And, at the time, this was in the 70s. And it was about being together, and it wasn't about, this angst that rock and roll had. And it really appealed to me. And people drank a lot of coffee and tea instead of alcohol. And just the whole culture really appealed to me of folk music. So then that kind of changed me. I went from being a rock and roll star, wanting that, to be involved in folk music.
And where can our audience find your music? Do you have a website online, or are you on YouTube?
Yeah, I do. It's at blueoconnell.com.
Let's talk about your job, because you're using music as part of your job. You're a certified music therapist. What exactly is that, and what does your job entail?
Yes. Music practitioner is similar to a music therapist, but it's different in the way that a music therapist, they diagnose the patient and they try to have a goal towards the session. So they might want to get the patient involved in the session, like sing along or play an instrument. But a music practitioner is, we don't diagnose them. I don't say, oh, this person has this illness, and so this is what I'm going to do. I don't try to make them participate. I mostly use a technique called entrainment, which is where I work with ICU patients where oftentimes their heart rate is kind of high, or there's a lot of pain, or I read the vital signs, and so I try to play something that would be relaxing to them, or to bring them peace, or to bring them comfort. So I often just improvise music that would sound familiar to them, but not a specific song, because they can't speak to me with a trach, or they're so ill they can't talk. So I would just play quiet, relaxing music for them, because
Nice.
It's very scientific for the rhythms. I want them to hook into the slow rhythm over time to bring down their heart rate and blood pressure.
Now, do you have any kind of medical training?
Well, in the music training that we got, we trained to play for various medical conditions, like high blood pressure or in pain, or if they were or actively dying, we learned a certain technique to use with them. Or sometimes we have to play uplifting music because sometimes they're sitting up in a chair for circulation reasons or something, and you want to play something up to stimulate them. Most of the times we want to bring them quiet, but sometimes they need to have something.
Where does one go to take this kind of class and get certified?
It's called the Music for Healing and Transition Program. mhtp.org is the website, and they have different training sites all around the United States. So you would go take a series of modules over a course of weekends in the course of about a year, and then you do an internship. I did my internship at UVA in 2004, and then they hired me, and it's work that I've always wanted to do. It's the dream job for me.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm sure you're very good at it. What would you tell, now that you've accomplished so many different things, I don't know if that's correct to say despite your hearing loss, but what would you tell your 20-year-old self now that you're older and wiser and more experienced?
I think that I would just say, just not to worry, because it's given me a lot of experiences that I never would have, being able to travel around and go to New Orleans, and I've gone to Poland at the World Hearing Center, and I've participated in research in 5 colleges around, and so I never would have imagined what a gift it brought me. Now I have audiologists in my life, and I talk to neuroscientists about how come they keep improving the technology. I never would have imagined that a loss would actually be kind of a gain in some ways.
I love that. That's a great way to look at it, and I'm sure it's very true. You did get your implant in 2009. I don't know much about cochlear implants. Is it supposed to last you the rest of your life? And going back to your point about the changes in technology, have there been any significant changes since you received your implant?
Oh yeah, well they do things they call upgrades, where they improve the technology about every 5 years. So I have one upgrade and I'm still behind, but they have all kinds of things now, like where they stream in the iPhone. So that's why earlier I had to turn it off, because it could start streaming. Something could all of a sudden start streaming in my hearing aids and my implant. But there's all kinds of things that you could do that you couldn't do before. There's programs. It's like a mini computer. There's a program, if I'm in a noisy room, I could flip a switch and it will bring down the background noise and focus on, like I'm talking to you, and focus on you. And all kinds of things. It's really amazing.
How is it different than your hearing aid?
The hearing aid is more like an amplifier that amplifies the frequencies that I don't hear, whereas the cochlear implant is more like a mini computer with 4 different programs for different situations, like that I could press a button, and if I'm in a lecture hall, I could hear a speaker all the way across the room, even though they have speakers. It has ways of filtering. It's sort of like a graphic program where you could front to back, you know what I mean? It's like the image would be front to back. It's like that. It has capabilities of changing the environment, the sound.
So here's the next question in terms of science. The cochlear implant can only help somebody that has some partial hearing? Can it help somebody that's completely deaf?
It has been known to. I think if there's no, the hearing nerve, I think if that's damaged, then it won't work. But I have known some people. There's a friend I know that she was deafened as a child from a fever. And so she didn't hear in almost 60 years in that ear. And she got it implanted. And it's taken a long time for it to start to do something, but she's able to hear now from that ear. So it's amazing.
That's amazing. That really is.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Do you have any plans to travel with your music? Are you going to continue to talk to associations and try to help with awareness and education?
Yeah, I really love doing that. I love to travel and to help other people because on Facebook, for example, there's several forums and support groups that someone could say, hey, I can't figure out how to do this. I can't figure out why it sounds like I have tinnitus and what should I do? And I've had this implant for 6 months and I still can't understand people and things like that. And I see these things and I think there must be information that they are not getting. Because when I first started all those years ago, there weren't these support groups that they have now. And so I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And so I feel like I've learned a lot over the years, and I could save some people some time and also be a support to them, because someone was up to me when I first was activated. She checked in with me every day. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I didn't like what she had to say because it was very frustrating for a while. But she was sort of a tough love kind of person. Yeah. Like, just hang in there and you could do it.
Do you think it's affected what you write about in your songs or how you harmonize or anything like that?
I think, well, definitely I'm more capable of doing, I remember when I added my hearing aid and my implant, I was able to hear every single note on the guitar, all the way, there's like 19 frets. And I remember when I went to bed that night, I laid there and I remembered that. And I thought, did that really happen? So I got out in my pajamas and went downstairs and I put them on again and I just listened again. And I thought, wow. I mean, that was amazing, because before I could sort of hear in my mind, it's like Beethoven, how he would compose. He couldn't hear from the outside in, but he could hear in his mind how it was supposed to sound. So I think my brain filled in things a lot when I was younger before. But to actually hear them, I play a lot more at high pitches now than I used to play too.
Speaking of playing, we're going to take a little break, so if you want to get your guitar, we'd love to hear a song from you.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you got your guitar. What are you going to play for us?
I'm going to play my song, Choose the Sky. It's a song that came to me when I was driving on the highway. This would be way back in the 90s, before the cell phone. And I was in the middle of Arizona, and there was no one else on the road, just me. And you just look out and just see nothing but beauty. But at the time when I was driving, and there was something on my mind, I was thinking, and then I looked out, and I really took it in and said, wow. I mean, look at that sky, when you're out west, and all you see is that big sky. And so that was the feeling that I was describing in this song called Choose the Sky. Sometimes we need a little space. Choose the sky, choose the sky. It's bigger than you, take in the view. And maybe there will be some clouds, but they will pass, nothing lasts. It changes you, just see the blue. Sometimes I get lost inside a thought, nowhere to go. A story that only I know. I need to get some perspective. When walking out into the day, choose the sky, choose the sky. The sun will renew, let it in you. At night the stars call you to dream, choose the sky, choose the sky. It's never too late to dream. Sometimes I get lost inside a thought, nowhere to go, a story that only I know. I need to get some perspective. So if you need a little space, choose the sky, choose the sky. The sun will renew if you do.
That was beautiful.
Thanks so much, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for playing, and thank you for being my guest today on the show. One last question. What would you tell somebody else or others who are struggling with their hearing, whether it's a severe hearing loss or a mild hearing loss?
Well, I would say that to be kind to yourself and don't be hard on yourself about it, to try to have some patience and to try to look for, there's always some positive thing that comes out of something that seems like a bad thing, but there's usually something good that comes out of it. If they could try to find the good in the situation, that's what I do.
Clearly, and I think that's excellent advice. So once again, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This is Speaking Candidly with Candace, and remember, every cloud has a silver lining.